New Orleans Saints are getting ready to head to Chicago to take on the Bears. Bears got a win on Monday Night Football against the Washington Commanders. Walk-off field goal there at the end. Unfortunately, Jaden Daniels' fumble cost his team. But the Saints are looking at two different strategies here. The team presently is preparing to go with their 1-5 record on the road to Chicago to try to figure out a way to win a game. And the organization is trying to figure out a way for this team to win moving forward. Well, the trade deadline is fast approaching, coming up on November the 4th. So a little less than a month. You're about 3 weeks away from the NFL trade deadline. And a season ago, New Orleans was very active at the trade deadline. And as we know, they dealt Marshawn Lattimore to the Washington Commanders. So my opinion, I think you all know where I stand on this. The Saints are not in any position to win now. Very clear at 1-5. And if you have a way to purge veteran assets that are not going to be part of your long-term rebuild, and you can get assets that would be both younger and more cost-effective, then you do it. If you can send Marshawn Lattimore to Washington for a second-round pick, absolutely. So you look at the roster and who's available. Well, Adam Schefter has a list that he posted of potential trade candidates. These are potential players that front office executive coaches could be available ahead of the trade deadline. So there's some names that are big names that are pretty obvious. Like Kirk Cousins is at the top of the list, right? The Falcons have committed to Michael Penix. Could they move Cousins if the price is right? Quite honestly, I don't know why Cincinnati hasn't already made that call. They traded for Flacco. Maybe they did make the call. They didn't like the price tag. But, I mean, if you're trying to hold this thing together until Burrow comes back, that would have made a ton of sense, but whatever. Russell Wilson's also on that list. Breece Hall. Alvin Kamara is on the list, according to Adam Schefter. But he's not the only Saint. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Brandin Cooks is on that list as well, as is Cameron Jordan. So it's a complex conversation to have because you have to weigh several different things. Number one, do these veteran players, most notably Kamara and Cam Jordan, do they want to be traded? Now, for whatever it is worth, Ian Rappaport with NFL Media has a report out there that New Orleans is getting calls about Kamara, but Kamara has told Mickey Loomis that he wants to remain a Saint for the remainder of his franchise. He wants to remain with the franchise for the remainder of his career. Remember, last year, Kamara signed a 2-year, $24.5 million deal, signed it in October. So he has signed through 2026. It was an extension on last year's deal. So he's got under contract for 25 and 26. So before next year, Kamara will have a decision to make. Does he want to play beyond 2026? Does he want to play 2026? I don't know. But the thing that Mickey Loomis reportedly, according to Rappaport, did was he was very proactive. So as to say, he went to Kamara to say, hey, look, we're getting calls about you. Are you interested in us trying to put a deal together? Do you want to go? Would you want to go? And Kamara, according to the report from Rappaport, wants to stay in New Orleans. He's 30 years old, averaging 4 yards a carry. It would be one of those things where it would gut you to see Alvin Kamara playing in a different uniform. But I also look and I say, man, we saw Johnny Unitas play with the Chargers, man. Tom Brady played for the Bucs. Emmitt Smith played for the Cardinals. Jerry Rice was a Seahawk and a Raider and a Bronco. I think he was at the Broncos too, wasn't he? He bounced around a bunch at the end of his career. The point is, if some of the greatest players in the history of the sport play for different teams at the end of their career, so too can Alvin Kamara. But if he wants to remain a Saint, and it's fiscally reasonable for him to do so, then you keep him. Cam Jordan is an interesting one as well because, he's one where the contract for Cam Jordan doesn't really preclude you from moving on after this season. So, and it doesn't do you much good, actually, to move on from him right now. Next year, he's an unrestricted free agent. Cam Jordan is. And so, he's got a $9 million cap hit. His dead number's 28. So, yeah, you take a little bit of a ding this year, but it doesn't really matter. You would eat that against your cap this year because you're not actively trying to win right now anyway. You've got $6 million in cap space. No, forgive me, I'm sorry, that's Cam's cash this year. But the point being, it wouldn't devastate you if you moved on from Cam and you were able to get an asset. The question is, does he want to finish his career in New Orleans, or does he want to have an opportunity to go somewhere else to try to win at the end? This happened with J.J. Watt. He was a Houston Texan. He's the greatest defensive player in the history of that organization. He was such a great asset to the city of Houston. But at the end of his career, the Texans said, hey, look, do you want to go somewhere where you have a chance to win while we rebuild? And so he went to Arizona, and it didn't work out. They didn't win. But he took a swing at trying to get a ring at the end of his career. And Cam can, go down on this sinking ship and stay a Saint forever if he wants to. Or there's the possibility he could go to a contending team as a rotational piece and try to get on a playoff run and win a championship. And there's a lot of teams that would take a veteran Cam Jordan who could maybe give you 30 really productive snaps a game, 20 to 30 snaps a game, and a great leader in the locker room, someone with a ton of experience and who's been on teams that have gone on playoff runs before. There's value to that for a team trying to win right now. It's not a long-term commitment. They're in a similar mode to what the Saints were in for a lot of years, but aren't anymore. I think the receivers are actually far more interesting. If Kamara wants to stay and Cam wants to stay, they're going to stay. But the receivers are more interesting because you got Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Brandin Cooks. You picked up the fifth-year option on Olave for next year. And listen, I've spoken my piece on Chris Olave. That's a guy that's not a number one and does not need to be paid like a number one. If that's what he's seeking, then you picked up the fifth-year option, so he's here next year. But after that, then he's leaving in free agency if you're not going to pay him what he wants. And the Saints have had this hard and fast rule about not going. It's so weird for a team that's so fiscally irresponsible. They end up standing true to their principles when it comes to their free agents. They have a number set. They're not going to go over it. And so you saw guys like Marcus Williams and Mark Ingram leave the organization over relative pennies on the dollar because the Saints wouldn't budge over the number they wanted. They were willing to pay. So if you can get real honest with Olave's representation right now about what he thinks he's going to command on the open market, and if you don't agree, then trade him. And I get that it might sting to see a former first-round pick walk out the door for a day 3 pick or something along those lines, 4, 5, 6, whatever it may be. But you would rather get something for him than watch him walk in free agency eventually, which is probably going to happen, which I actually hope happens instead of watching New Orleans invest number one wide receiver money into a guy that's clearly not. Brandin Cooks is old. Someone wants to give you something for him, great. He's made an almost non-existent impact on your offense so far through 6 games. And totally shocking. Who could have seen that coming? We talked about it all offseason. He's the same receiver as Shaheed and Olave. He's the same. He's the same size. He's older, and he's been less productive in the last 2 years. But that's the guy you went and signed. I screamed at the top of my lungs about letting Marquez Valdes-Scantling walk away, and instead you went and paid more money for an older receiver who was less productive and the same size as the guys you already got. If someone's willing to give you anything at all for Brandin Cooks, take it. He's got 13 catches for 124 yards so far through 6 games on 13 targets. On 17 targets. Yes. Someone's going to give you something for Cooks, take it. I don't think it's going to happen because only the New Orleans Saints would have signed Brandin Cooks at his age and his productivity to a multi-year contract. So it's almost impossible to think someone's going to give you an asset for an aging veteran player that you signed to a multi-year deal. Again, that's the downside of having awful front office leadership and management when you sign aging, declining players to multi-year deals. Stupid. So I don't think you're going to get anything for Cooks. The real player that might have value is Shaheed. You signed Shaheed to a 1-year deal. And remember, he was coming off injury. So you sign him to a one-year deal, and that's a guy that if he keeps playing at the level he is, he's got 26 catches already for 316 and 2 scores. He's a true deep threat. If Rashid Shaheed and the New Orleans Saints right now are on different planets for what they think he's going to be worth after the season when he hits free agency, that's one where I think you have to look at saying, can we trade this guy? Could we trade this guy to a contending team? And then listen, when he hits free agency after the season, maybe you make a run at him. Or the team that might trade for him would probably try to lock him up in a long-term deal. It'd probably be part of the trade. But Shaheed is the one that actually has real value. He's a home run hitter on offense. He's a tough dude. He's young. Like, Shaheed is the guy that I think would actually have some real trade value. He's 27. You would just have to decide, do you want Shaheed to be a cornerstone piece of what you're building for the future? Like, are you willing to invest a 4 or 5 year deal into Rashid Shaheed north of 15, 20 million per? And if that's the case, you're going to give Shaheed $75 million, then okay. But if not, then he's probably going to go test free agency. And before you let him do that, get something for him, for the investment you've made in him. That's the handful of players you're keeping an eye on, but the one that would seem to have the most value in a trade situation would be Rashid Shaheed. Again, November 4th is the trade deadline. We're going to keep an eye on it. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.